Dr. Phil's hands trembled as he looked inside the small wooden box. His mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time in 30 years of television, America's most famous psychologist was completely speechless. "Stop the tape," he finally whispered, his voice barely audible. The studio fell into absolute silence. What was in that box that could freeze Dr. Phil mid-show? Nobody in that studio, or watching at home, was prepared for what came next. 45 minutes earlier, the show had started like any other Tuesday taping. The audience filed in, chatting about their day, excited to see Dr. Phil in person. The warm-up comedian had them laughing. Stage managers checked microphones. Everything was routine. Then Sarah Mitchell walked onto that stage. She was 53 years old, wearing a simple blue cardigan and jeans. Her hands clutched a small decorative box, maybe 6 inches square, made of dark wood with intricate carvings on the lid. She held it like it was made of glass, like one wrong move would shatter everything. Dr. Phil greeted her with his signature confident stride. "Sarah, welcome. Now, you wrote to us saying you needed to tell your family the truth about something that happened 28 years ago. Is that right?" "Yes." Sarah's voice cracked immediately. "My daughters are here. They don't know why I brought them." The camera panned to 2 women in the audience, mid-20s, both looking confused and worried. Dr. Phil nodded, settling into his chair with that practiced ease of someone who's heard thousands of stories. "All right, let's start from the beginning. What is it that your daughters don't know?" Sarah took a breath. Her fingers tightened around the box. "They don't know about their brother." The studio went completely silent. Dr. Phil's expression shifted from casual to focused in an instant. "Your daughters don't know they have a brother," Dr. Phil repeated slowly, leaning forward. "How old is this boy?" "He would be 28 now." Sarah's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Would be." Dr. Phil's eyes narrowed. 30 years of reading people told him something was deeply wrong here. "Sarah, what do you mean by would be?" "He died when he was 3 days old." Tears started streaming down Sarah's face. "And I never told anyone. Not my husband. Not my parents. Not the daughters I had afterwards. Nobody." The audience gasped. One of the daughters in the crowd stood up, her hand over her mouth. A producer moved toward her, but Dr. Phil raised his hand. "Not yet, let this play out." "Sarah," Dr. Phil's voice was gentle now, but firm. "You've been carrying this alone for 20 years. That's a burden no one should carry. But I need you to help me understand something. Why now? Why are you telling this story today?" Sarah looked down at the box in her lap. "Because I can't carry him anymore." Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. "You can't carry him anymore," Dr. Phil echoed. "Sarah, what's in the box?" Sarah's hands were shaking so badly now she could barely hold it. "Everything I have left of him. The hospital bracelet. A lock of his hair. The only photograph I took before." She couldn't finish the sentence. Dr. Phil stood up slowly and walked over to Sarah. This wasn't the scripted plan. The producers exchanged glances. The audience was completely still, some crying quietly. "May I?" Dr. Phil extended his hand toward the box. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. She placed the small wooden box in Dr. Phil's hands like she was handing over her soul. Dr. Phil opened it carefully. Inside, resting on faded blue fabric, was a tiny hospital bracelet, the kind they'd put on newborns. Next to it, a small clear bag with a curl of dark hair. And underneath, a single Polaroid photograph of a baby so small he fit in the palm of a hand. Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. For several long seconds, Dr. Phil just stared at the contents. His jaw tightened. He closed the box gently and looked back at Sarah, then at the 2 daughters in the audience who were now both standing, holding each other. "Stop the tape," Dr. Phil said quietly to the crew. "Stop recording." The command rippled through the studio. Cameras stopped moving. The audience held their breath. This never happened. Dr. Phil never stopped mid-show. He handed the box back to Sarah with both hands, then turned to face the audience directly. "Bring Sarah's daughters up here. Now." Stage manager scrambled. The two young women, both crying, were escorted to the stage. They sat on either side of their mother, either of them understanding yet what was happening. Dr. Phil pulled his chair directly in front of all three women. He sat down, elbows on his knees, looking each of them in the eye. "Ladies, your mother asked to come on this show because she's been carrying something that's destroying her from the inside out. And she can't do it anymore. She needs you to know the truth, and she needs you to help her decide what to do with this." He gestured to the box. Sarah was sobbing now, her daughters on either side holding her hands but still looking confused. 28 years ago, before either of you were born, your mother had a baby boy. He lived for 3 days. And then he died. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. The older daughter, Emma, gasped. "Mom? What? We don't have a brother." "You did," Sarah whispered. "You did. His name was Michael." The younger daughter, Grace, was shaking her head. "Why didn't you ever tell us? All these years?" "Because I was ashamed." Sarah's voice broke. "Because I thought it was my fault. Because the doctors said he died from complications, but I kept thinking if I had done something different, if I had known something was wrong, if I had—" "Stop," Dr. Phil interrupted, but gently. "Sarah, look at me. Look at me right now." Sarah raised her tear-stained face. "A baby dying from medical complications is not your fault. You understand me? That's not guilt you've been carrying, that's grief. Profound, unprocessed grief that you've been drowning in for nearly 3 decades. He turned to the daughters. "And you two need to understand something. Your mother didn't hide this to hurt you. She hid it because she was so broken by this loss that she couldn't speak about it. Do you understand the difference?" Both daughters nodded, tears streaming down their faces. Emma reached for the box. Can I see him?" Sarah handed it to her with shaking hands. Emma opened it carefully, Grace leaning in to look. They saw the tiny bracelet, the curl of hair, the photograph of their brother they never knew existed. "He's so small," Grace whispered. "Mom, he's so small. He was early," Sarah managed to say. 6 weeks early? They tried everything, but his lungs weren't developed enough. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Dr. Phil stood up and walked off stage. The audience watched in confusion. Even the producers looked at each other. Where was he going? 30 seconds later, Dr. Phil returned carrying a small white card. He sat back down in front of the 3 women. "Sarah, you told my producers before the show that you never gave Michael a proper burial. That you were too young, too scared, too overwhelmed to arrange anything. Is that true?" Sarah nodded, unable to speak. "And you've been carrying his ashes, just the small amount the hospital gave you, in that box for 28 years because you didn't know what else to do with them." Another nod. Dr. Phil held up the card. "This is the number for Eternal Gardens Memorial Park here in Los Angeles. I called them during the break. They have a section specifically for infant loss. And they're going to help you, all 3 of you, give Michael the ceremony he deserves." Sarah's face crumpled. "I can't afford. It's taken care of," Dr. Phil interrupted. "Everything. The plot, the marker, the service. Whatever you need to finally lay your son to rest with dignity." The studio erupted in tears. Audience members were openly crying. The daughters threw their arms around their mother, all 3 of them sobbing together. Dr. Phil stepped back, giving them space, his own eyes noticeably wet. A stage manager approached him with a tissue box. He took one, not bothering to hide that this had gotten to him too. After several minutes, when the 3 women had calmed slightly, Dr. Phil sat back down. "Sarah, I need you to hear me very clearly. What you've been doing for 28 years, that's not living. That's surviving. You've been in survival mode since the day Michael died, and it's time to start living again. I don't know how. Sarah whispered. That's why you're here, Dr. Phil said simply. That's why you finally decided to tell your daughters. Because you knew you couldn't do this alone anymore. He turned to Emma and Grace. And you too, you have a choice right now. You can be angry that your mother kept this secret, or you can recognize that she's been in so much pain she couldn't speak about it. What do you choose? Emma spoke first, her voice thick with emotion. We're not angry, Dr. Phil. We're sad. We're sad she's been carrying this alone. We're sad we have a brother we'll never meet. But we're not angry at Mom. Grace nodded in agreement. We want to help her. We want to help give Michael a proper burial. He's our brother too. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Dr. Phil nodded slowly. That's the right answer. That's exactly the right answer. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out another card. Sarah, this is the contact information for a grief counselor who specializes in infant loss. She works specifically with mothers who've experienced what you have. I want you to call her this week. Will you do that? Yes, Sarah said immediately. Yes, I will. Good. Because here's what I need you to understand. There are thousands of women just like you. Women who lost children and never knew how to process that grief. Women who've been carrying boxes and secrets and shame for years, thinking they were alone. You're not alone. You were never alone. He stood up and addressed the audience directly. If anyone watching this has experienced infant loss and never properly grieved, I want you to know that it's not too late. It's never too late to honor that child, to process that pain, to finally let yourself heal. The audience applauded, many still wiping tears. Dr. Phil turned back to the three women on stage. One more thing, he said, reaching behind his chair. He pulled out a small wrapped package. This is a memory journal. It's designed specifically for infant loss. Sarah, I want you and your daughters to fill this out together. Write down everything you remember about Michael. His weight, his tiny features, the 3 days you had with him. Create the story he didn't get to live. Sarah took the journal with trembling hands. Thank you. Thank you so much. You don't need to thank me, Dr. Phil said, his voice rough with emotion. You just need to promise me you're going to do the work. Real grief work. No more carrying this alone. I promise, Sarah said, and this time her voice was stronger. Dr. Phil looked at all three of them. All right. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the practical steps, the memorial service, the counseling, all of it. But right now, I think you three need a moment together. He gestured to the stage managers, who quickly came forward with water and tissues. Dr. Phil walked over to the audience while the cameras reset. An older woman in the front row reached out and touched his arm. Dr. Phil, I lost my baby 30 years ago. I've never talked about it either. Dr. Phil crouched down to her level. Then it's time to start. You hear me? It's time. She nodded, crying. Several other women around her were also crying, nodding in recognition. The grief in that studio was palpable. Decades of unspoken loss suddenly given permission to exist. After the taping ended, something remarkable happened. 17 women from the audience approached the stage. Each of them had experienced infant loss. Each of them had kept it mostly secret. Each of them had been moved by Sarah's courage to finally speak her truth. Dr. Phil gathered them all on stage in a circle. No cameras, no recording, just these 18 women and Dr. Phil, sitting together in the presence of shared grief. This, he said quietly, is why we do what we do. Not for the ratings, not for the drama. For moments like this, where people realize they're not alone. One by one, each woman shared her story. Each box of memories, each secret pregnancy, each child who lived for hours or days or weeks before slipping away. The grief counselor Dr. Phil had mentioned was brought in immediately. She sat with them, took their information, scheduled appointments. 3 weeks later, Sarah, Emma, and Grace held a memorial service for Michael. It was small, just immediate family and the grief counselor. The tiny plot had a simple marker. Michael James Mitchell. 3 days of love. Forever in our hearts. Sarah placed the wooden box at the base of the marker. I can breathe, she said. For the first time in 28 years, I can actually breathe. The episode became one of the most watched in Dr. Phil history. The show received over 10,000 emails from women who had experienced similar losses. Memorial parks across the country reported increases in families finally holding services for babies lost years ago. Sarah appeared 6 months later for a follow-up. She looked lighter, transformed. How are you doing? Dr. Phil asked. I'm healing, she said simply. For the first time ever, I'm actually healing. The small wooden box sits on a grave in Los Angeles now, no longer carried by trembling hands. Michael James Mitchell lived only 3 days, but through his mother's courage and Dr. Phil's compassion, his brief life touched thousands. That small wooden box, once a prison of grief, became a symbol of liberation, proof that it's never too late to tell the truth, never too late to grieve properly, never too late to finally let yourself heal.